is Eric, the racket scientist here, with just kind of a low-key video for today. If you've been following my social media or whatever, you might know that I've been spending the past 6 months or so buying up AxForce 80 rackets, as you can see here. I have them all kind of laid out for you here. And the intent of this process was going to be to get enough of the same racket so that I could do a bunch of experiments. So primarily I was going to want to be able to experiment with different string setups, and I also wanted to be able to figure out what differences there could be in quality control from the factory. So figuring out the different measurements of the different rackets. So as for the reason that I picked the AxForce 80, well, let's go ahead and get started first, actually. So you might be able to see here, I have 7 of these rackets, and 5 of them are 4U models, 2 of them are 3U models. And I actually have one more on the way at some point, and it's going to be another 4U model, but a repaired one, so that's going to be kind of interesting as well. So the background behind that is there's this guy in the Bay Area, California, who has a racket repair service. So he sends the rackets over to some warehouse in China where they get repaired. And yeah, so that's just a little extra to figure out if those racket repair services are actually worth it, if that will hold tension, and if it will play similarly to the existing rackets that I have. If it measures the same, if they added any weight to it. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started, and I'll talk about what I feel like I want to talk about as I'm going. Okay. So most of these rackets were not mine, obviously. Funny story about these 3U models, though, is that this was the first, actually, the first AxForce 80 was a 3U model that I picked up. I bought this from Yumo, and as 3U models go, that one was actually on the lighter side. I believe this one measured in at 81 or 82 grams, and a lot of my 4U rackets actually will come within that, or sorry, 91 or 92 grams, and actually a lot of my 4U racket models will measure in at 91 or 92 grams as well. So I would say that for these Li-Ning rackets, especially these AxForce 80s, they kind of will come in a little low on the weight, depending on where you source them from, okay? And this 3U model, there's a funny story behind this one, actually, which is that I believe this is one that I actually owned originally. There was a person at the University of Washington club that sold this to me for a good price, and I picked it up. And it turned out to be quite a bit heavier than my other 3U model. And so I sold it because I was like, okay, well, this is significantly heavier. This one turned out to be 94 grams. And when I weigh these rackets, I mean, these are fully, I weigh them when they're as used. So this would be strung and gripped. This would be 91, 92 grams. And this one would have been 94. So I sold this one. And then the guy that I sold it to was selling both a 4 and a 3U model. And he gave me a deal if I bought both of them. So I did. And so I have this one back now, so I can include it in my experiments. So yeah, let me talk about exactly what I'm going to be doing here. So one of the first things that I want to do is get some measurements for all these rackets. Now, the only way that I'm going to be able to truly measure all these rackets very accurately is if all of them are unstrung and with the grips completely removed. So eventually that's going to be my goal, is to get all of the rackets in that state. And then I'm going to take it to Pro Racket Sport, which is a shop that I have worked or I don't know if you can call it working closely with, but I bought a lot of stuff from that shop. It's the premier badminton equipment store in the Seattle area. I've known the owner Ian for several years. They have a Yonex precision measurement machine there, and once I get all of these down to the wooden handle and without strings, then I plan to measure every single one so we can figure out and see what the differences are. So today's video is just going to be me ungripping and cleaning off some of these rackets. I'm not going to do all of these because some of them, like this 3U here, is the grip and the strings are still good. So I'm going to see if I can just use that until it breaks. But if it doesn't break, then eventually I'll come back and do those too. But we're going to start here with this other 3U model, and hopefully we don't run into some weird surprises here. And so while I'm doing that, let's talk through a little bit why I chose the AxForce 80 for this experiment, so to speak. Because in the United States, it's not so easy to get Li-Ning rackets at in the present day, and that's partially because in maybe 2023 there was some sort of trade dispute, embargo, whatever, around between Li-Ning and the US, claiming that Li-Ning was using North Korean labor in their factories, and Li-Ning was, of course, like, where's your proof? The United States was like, well, we don't need proof and you're banned anyways. So that kind of put a damper on things, as I really like Li-Ning rackets. But people, if you're someone who wants Li-Ning rackets anyways, you're going to get your hands on them, because there are plenty of people in the badminton community who go to China and will bring these rackets back. And so the interesting thing about the AxForce 80 is that I see these all the time on Facebook Marketplace or getting sold, and I think part of the reason is because it's a racket with a unique swing style. What I mean by that is there's, on the current market, to my knowledge, there are no other rackets that swing quite the same that are currently being sold. Okay, so we got some electrical tape on here. That's always a good sign. I like it when people will do this to protect the wood of the racket. You know, we're gonna get a little bit of splintering here. That's usually pretty normal. Just a little bit of the kind of the wood splinters will, I don't know if the camera will focus on that, but there. It's relatively normal for some of the top layer of wood to splinter off a little bit. Relatively inconsequential. I mean, if it was that soft to begin with, it was going to come off if you were to like rub it really hard or whatever, which is what she said. So we can also see some signs here that there was probably previous grip job that actually went the opposite way. Now, if this really was the racket that I used to own, then that probably was from when I gripped it, although I probably would have done a cleaner job of it. We can see that the wood is like kind of dyed very black here. I wonder if that's because of the electrical tape, but I'm just gonna get these off here. go ahead and clean this off a little bit. I have some isopropyl wipes over here. And I like these just because they're easy to use. You know, by and large, these are generally not, you know, woodworkers will tell you not to use these sort of alcohol wipes on wood because it dries it out a little bit. I think it's fine if you're just getting rid of topical things, like residue or whatever. If you really cared a lot, then you could take some mineral oil, kind of put a little bit of that on the wooden handle. And you generally would want to do that for like cutting boards and stuff too, if you want them to not dry out and last a long time. So looks like we're getting some of this off, but in general the coloring on the wood handle is probably just going to stay there, and that's okay. You know, we're not really going to see that. I'm really just trying to get rid of any residue, but because there was electrical tape on it, the wood on the handle was mostly protected, which is good. And whenever you go over with these wipes, which are cloth, sometimes there will be a little fuzzies stuck afterwards, so we want to kind of get rid of those. So I got my tweezers here. I'm just gonna go over, take this off. So yeah, the reason I chose the AxForce 80 has a unique swing style, and it shows up on Marketplace a lot. Now, the AxForce 80, I believe, is one of the first rackets of Li-Ning's newest generation. Now, of the three series, the Blade X, AxForce, and Halberd Tech, the Blade X is actually the oldest series. So the Blade X came out first, but did not show a lot of popularity, especially in North America. And it wasn't really until the AxForce 80, which is the first high-end racket in the AxForce series, came out that we really started to see a lot of these more modern Li-Ning rackets in North America. Okay, and so when the first thing comes out, people get really excited. Okay, and a lot of people bought this racket. So there's a lot of them out there. And going back to what I was saying about the unique swing style, and I'll explain that a little bit later, but all you need to know is that the result of that is that a lot of people bought this racket because of the hype, because they're like, oh, this is a powerful racket. I can hit really hard with it. But they didn't buy this racket realizing that, or knowing that it would suit their swing style, right? And I think this is a very important point that I've commonly bring up in my other articles and reviews too, which is that, you know, rackets are not just a spec sheet. And this is why it's important to try them and to understand what the design goals of the racket are, so that when you think about buying or trying a racket, you don't just buy into the hype and, you know, purchase what everyone else is purchasing. Although I'm one to talk because, you know, obviously I buy every single new racket. So let's go ahead and move on to the For You ones now that we've got this one clean. Although I did notice something, which is that this has been restrung several times. So I don't know if you can zoom in and see this, but you can see that this grommet has been turned. All four sides of this grommet have been used. So this thing has been restrung several times, 4 or 5. This grommet is completely dead. So I might have to get a new set on this one when the opportunity comes up. And then on my original one, yeah, looks pretty good. And going back to this one, this was the first AxForce 80 I got. It wasn't a 4U model, it was a 3U because, well, there were a couple of reasons. First of all, when this racket first came out, it was being sold at Yumo, which is in Vancouver, and I'm in Seattle. So Yumo is one of the closest shops to where I can get Li-Ning rackets locally. And they had already sold out of 4U. So I was like, you know what? I'll just try the 3U model anyways. And this is when Yuta Watanabe from Japan at first switched over to the AxForce 80, and no one really knew or could not find online the information of which weight he was using. And some people were speculating that he would be using the 3U because one of the previous rackets he used before that was the Aeronaut 9000C, which is a 3U head heavy racket. So I got this and quickly realized that the 3U variant it's pretty heavy. It's pretty hard to play doubles with. However, I will say that the 3U model I really like for singles. And from my memory, that was the final racket of choice for Chen Long before he retired. And he was actually on the promotional material, like that little cardboard cutout that you get over the racket. He's on that one for the AxForce 80. But then I got the 4U model, and it's a lot better for doubles. And so going back to what I was saying, because a lot of people found out that they didn't actually like how this racket played, or at least that is my hypothesis, it's actually pretty easy to find these on Facebook Marketplace and for a reasonable price, right? Because the market is saturated, so to speak. A lot of people are selling them, and because so many newer flagship rackets have come out in the Blade X Halbertech AxForce series, there's AxForce 100, AxForce 90, all the Halbertech rackets, Blade X rackets, and a lot of those are rackets that people generally like better, or how I should say, they fit the current meta, or they fit people's expectations for what a fast attacking racket could be, because this definitely doesn't. And so people are trying to get rid of these. Even stores like like the E78 shop from Hong Kong is having this AxForce 80 on sale often now, probably because they don't sell too well. I've also heard rumors that there's going to be a new version of this racket coming out, so we'll see about that. Anyways, so of these 5 rackets, these 2 are ones that I bought new. I don't remember which ones I bought where. I had 3 of these, and one of them is broken, and the broken one is the one that I sent to get repaired in China. And I believe one of these is from Yumo after they restocked, and then one of these is from E78, and the third one I'm not super sure. But those 3 I bought new, and then these 3 are used models that I picked up over the past 6 months when I've been shopping for them. So let's see, this blue one I picked up in San Jose, Bay Area. The red one is also from that guy that sold me back the 3U. So this is the one that I kind of reached out to him about. This is the only one that's kind of damaged. There's a chip here, but all the other ones are in quite good condition. And then this white one is sold to me by a friend of mine at the University of Washington Badminton Club. So, again, same story with the two that I own. The strings and the grips are still relatively good, so I'm not going to touch those for now. See if we can break the strings eventually. So we're going to start with these three. We're just going to undo the grips. I'm going to clean them. I'm going to start with these two, I guess. Okay. Now I can kind of tell just from looking at this that I'm pretty sure the person has removed the undergrip. You can kind of see how the cone is not smooth. There's a little bit of a indent here. So we'll see. Let's undo this and take a look. Now, one of the reasons that I personally like the AxForce 80 is that, I guess unlike a lot of people that I meet, I tend to like rackets that will load up or lag during the swing. One of the things that I discuss in my article is kind of how the head shaft behavior is unique in this racket. So you'll be able to tell that this frame is very boxy and rectangular. It's quite angled. Not that thick, but it's very boxy. So a lot of air resistance. I think the head is kind of like an average size, average overall, which means because in the modern day, most rackets tend to have trending towards slightly smaller heads, right? Like the nano flare rackets and whatnot. So you could argue that this head is on the larger side for current top of the line rackets. And what that means is a lot of air resistance, basically. So when you're, loading up in the pre-swing, when you're setting your arm, getting ready to swing, the racket kind of stays behind, helps flex the shaft just a little bit. It doesn't accelerate forward immediately. Some people don't like that, right? Because obviously the timing part. But some people know how to leverage that. I found that the people who use this racket, the ones who tend to like it more tend to be singles players, and I think that makes sense because singles players tend to have more relaxed strokes. They take their time. They don't try to make shortcuts or swing really quickly with the wrist or whatever. And so when that head loads up, it stores a lot of potential energy. And if you can release it with the right timing, you get a very nice punch out of it, right? So the head flexes back and then comes through, helps you punch through that shuttle. It's very satisfying, and it's especially satisfying when you have strings that are very willing to pop, i.e. it's strung at higher tension. Actually, this is one racket where I like to run higher tension than most of my other rackets just because it's so satisfying. Like most of my other rackets, I'll start at 26 pounds, but I'll typically run 27 once I get used to it. But this racket, the AxForce 80, especially the 3U, sometimes I run at 29, 30. And then the 4U ones I'll run at 28, 29 or something like that. And the other thing I like about it is that because the head is so boxy, the feeling you get on the string bed is very visceral. So I find that this head is very good at transferring the contact feeling down through the handle. it's kind of the opposite of what you can say for some of the Victor rackets, for instance, especially the Brave swords. People have kind of described that as hollow feeling. And so it'd be the opposite of that. It's very visceral, substantial. Even in soft contact, like around the net area. Okay, so same story over here. We saw that I took off a layer of electrical tape, which is, it's nice that the original owner of this racket had done that. I don't know if you saw it, but on the electrical tape, yeah, so there was some of the double-sided tape that holds on the stock grip. Some of that was still on there, but we were lucky and it actually came off with the electrical tape. So that reduces our need to have to clean that up by quite a bit. Now, there's still a little bit left here and there. So we might want to get that off. And then you can see there's little bits and traces of the grip here. But overall, this is a pretty good job. So we're not going to have to do too much work. So the type of adhesive that Li-Ning uses is not as easy to remove with the isopropyl, but there might be little enough that we can. Let's go ahead and give it a try. The adhesive that Yonex uses to secure their stock grips dissolves very easily with isopropyl. So usually these wipes are all you need to clean the grip of a Yonex racket, which is very convenient. But for Victor rackets and Li-Ning rackets, especially one where the adhesive double-sided tape goes completely up and down the racket handle, those are really annoying, and you'll often need a lot of Goo Gone to get that out. And then your racket handle just kind of smells like Goo Gone, like oranges. It's not that that really matters because you're not going to be smelling it, but okay. So it is coming off, and that's good. Here, we'll get you some ASMR. A little bit over here. I'm trying to remember if there were any other professional players that use this racket. I know Gojin Wei, the women's singles player from Malaysia, uses the AxForce 70, so not quite the same. I seem to remember, I know there is a player that at least used to use the AxForce 80. Who was it? Was it someone from Malaysia? Can't quite remember. Well, Yuta Watanabe currently uses what looks like a Halbertech 9000, which I do actually have on my wall right now. I say looks like because it's actually a reskinned AxForce 80. And you can tell because the AxForce 80 does not have a fully recessed frame. well, it's very boxy, and you can tell the recess, the frame recess ends around here, like that. So if you get close-ups of this racket, you can see that. And the Halbertech 9000, actually all of the high-end Halbertechs, the 7, 8, and 9000, have fully recessed frames. So that's how you can tell that he is using a repainted racket. Okay. This wipe is drying up, so I might have to switch to a new one. I think this racket's very fun because you can manipulate the head of the racket in several different ways that you can't with others. A lot of people will say that this racket enables a very whippy swing, and I agree with that. You can see that in the way that Yuta Watanabe plays, where he holds the racket for a very long time, and then when he swings it, he kind of does this rebound action. And because the head has so much air resistance and also momentum from all the head weight, you get a really nice punch out of this racket if you get the timing right. And that's a big if, because with a racket with so much head weight and air resistance, it will not respond very directly. Like, people will talk about having a direct response, which really is just breaks down to the handling of the racket, like how well it maneuvers, how precisely it maneuvers, and also how quickly the head comes through the swing. Like, you know, is there some sort of delay or whatever? And this racket absolutely is not that. Not at all. So like drive battles and like reactionary shots don't feel very good with this racket. Like, you have to know what you're hitting. And for a lot of players who aren't quite at that level where they can anticipate shots well, this racket probably doesn't work for them. Because you kind of get hung out to dry, right? So like, just imagine you're kind of going for this defensive shot, reactionary shot, and then the head of the racket lags behind. Okay, you're not really going to get the angle that you want there, unfortunately. Okay, cool. Okay. Let's do this one next. So I can tell that this guy actually strung +2 on the cross, right? This is a long ongoing debate of whether or not, or how much rather I should say, how much higher you should be stringing on the cross rather than the mains. So just to give some reference, I always string my rackets with +1 pound. So some people say 10%. So if you're stringing like in the high 20s, then really that would mean +2 pounds, right? But I string +1 pound, and you can see that it actually makes, or maybe you can or can't, you can see that this makes a difference here. So here I have the T-joints lined up completely, and it's going to look a little weird when I go over here, but you can see that, yeah, here, there's about, the one with the orange strings, the one I just picked up, or the first one I picked up, is about 2 to 3 millimeters longer. And maybe you'll be able to tell that the head width is also different. the perspective is a little strange. So here, I'm gonna switch them again. Maybe you can see from the sides that they're kind of different. Or like looking at the top and bottom here. And, you know, this could be different for every racket, but there's a very easy way to check, which is just to take one without strings and then overlay that and see if it's happy. So you can see that for the one without strings, it also doesn't quite line up. The one without strings is closer in shape to the racket that I have strung with +1 pound on the cross, which is why I do this one at +1. Nonetheless, I have played with this racket with +2 on the cross before. The last one I bought from Yumo, I told them to string it with +1, but they ended up doing +2, and I could tell from the head shape. Okay, so it looks like this guy strung it with 66 Ultimax, maybe 26 pounds. Could be worth using maybe, but we'll see. So let's go and undo this. So again, this is the one that's damaged. It's not really that bad though. I mean, if I'm getting these for a reasonable price, then I don't really care that much. I think this guy gave this racket to me for $130, which is a pretty good deal. So I have no complaints. There's also a little chip here on the cone, which I'm not quite sure how that happened. And that makes sense because it was the same guy who gripped this racket. You got the same stuff underneath, which is a red-pink cushion wrap. It's always nice to see people who take care of their grips. So I'm not sure if this is the Yonex brand one, but the cushion wrap, you can get rolls of this on Amazon for really cheap. They're like pack of 12 for, I don't know, 20 bucks or something. Okay. Electrical tape again. Let's get that off. I don't mean in any way though that this racket is bad for doubles when I say that it's slow to react, because the reality is, for example, when you're in a drive battle and you are trying to get to that next level in doubles, right, and you want to like win drive battles or gain the initiative, you have to be able to anticipate when the bird is coming at you. And then if you have to anticipate it, then even with the racket that's considered slow, you should be able to hit it. Now, you won't be able to react as quickly as if you had a maneuverable racket. But in what I mean is in most standard situations, like, you know, neutral drive battles, and by neutral I mean no one having an advantage, and even in defensive situations, if your racket discipline and your form is good, like you should still be able to play with this racket. Okay, and it's almost the opposite, where people with rackets that are too maneuverable and too light, they'll kind of trend towards those just because, oh, you know, I can defend more easily and I can hit drives more easily, but it also builds the bad habit of not having your arm and your racket ready for the drives or the defense. And so it almost kind of makes it a obsolete point in some situations. And playing doubles with a racket like this can kind of bring you back down to earth, so to speak. So, okay, this is a kind of a weird one here. So it looks like you can see that there's some markings here. That isn't any sort of substance though, and actually my best guess, this black is obviously dye from the electrical tape that the other guy put on. And I think this might be where the stock tape was, and so it was less exposed to the elements. It might be a little bit of the original spray paint. So contrary to how this looks, this handle is actually pretty clean right now. There's a little bit of stuff here, which I'm going to get rid of. Okay, let's... I will say that I do prefer the AxForce 80 in colder conditions because, like I said, or you might be able to tell from what I was describing that the head weight and the frame really help you to punch through a shuttle that feels heavy. So when I played at the University of Washington, that gym is a very slow playing gym, slow and dry. So this racket feels really good in that gym. And the gym that I currently play in too, SBC, Seattle Badminton Club, works pretty well there too. The main problem is that when it gets hot and humid, you lose kind of some of that feeling. And that will go for any racket because the humidity, the bird will absorb some of that humidity, will make it feel dull. But in those situations, a racket that will have more of a response to striking the shuttle, so something with less head weight, and like you can think of it as from physics perspective, right? Like every force has an equal and opposite reaction. So when you're hitting, you'll get more response from something like a headlight racket, because when you hit the shuttle, there's less momentum in the racket head. And so something like that, you will get more feeling in humid and hot conditions. So in order to retain that feeling, you'll want to increase the tension. So I run these at 28 or 29, usually during the summer only. Okay. It's probably going to be the final racket for today because I told you those 3 that were mine I'm going to leave alone for now. I'll make a second part video once I'm ready to do those. And I'm not looking forward to that because it's always a little sad to undo something that you did well, because it's like I have some sort of standard to when I like to grip my rackets, like, you know, how it should be or whatever, and you know, once you do it, you just do it and forget about it forever. But here I am setting out to undo it all for science, in the name of science. I always do feel like it's a little bit of shame to take off the stock grip of these modern Li-Ning rackets because it's actually quite nice, right? This is one that I actually feel like I might be able to play with. You can see there's a lot of contour here, and the grip itself is is supple, has some good contour on it. And if you've taken one of these off before, the grip underneath it's not just like some shitty piece of rubber. It's the composite or whatever it's made of it's a pretty nice material. It has a lot of fabric in it, and so it kind of gives it a like a nice full-bodied feeling when you hold on to it. We're gonna take this off because that is what science demands. Yeah, so if we take a look here, we can see, maybe we can see, this is fabric. Here, you can get some ASMR here. Yeah. You can also see maybe that there is this double-sided adhesive tape here. And in some of the Li-Ning rackets, they used to run this like double-sided tape along the whole length under the grip, and that was super annoying. But as you can see, they haven't done that here. They only put a strip at the top, and then they're going to put one at the bottom here. And I much prefer this because it's so easy to keep clean. You can see that there's a little bit of fuzzy stuff here, but for the most part, quite clean. And I really appreciate that. This is by far the most beautiful handle so far in this video. So I also have yet to discover what these markings mean, but I assume this is manufacture date. Although I think it's interesting that it doesn't include the year. And I'm not sure what that is. Could be the factory. I'll have to go back and look at the other ones that I had. So yeah, I got a little bit lucky here. Some of this tape is coming off along with the grip. Then we want to take off the staple here. So I like to take off the staple before I take the grip completely off, because if I have to wedge something under that staple, it's gonna like damage whatever's under it. And especially if it's a staple at the top of the grip. So this one doesn't have it, but a lot of Yonex rackets will have a staple over here, right at the base of the cone. And then if you were to take something like this, like a very small screwdriver, and kind of get under it, you could dent the wood. And so keeping this grip on before doing that can avoid some of that damage. So we're just going to get under here, and pry it off. It's nice and easy. Okay. Then all right. And then for this double-sided tape, I always like to try to do as much as possible by hand. You can see that some of it's peeling. This top bit here actually came off with the stock grip, which is convenient and kind of gives us an edge to peel from. So the more we can peel by hand, the less we'll have to dissolve and use substances to get off, and the less substances on natural wood, the better. You can see there's a nice strip there. It's very satisfying. I think that's most, well, no, here's a bit. Okay. I think that's almost as good as it gets. Just like a tiny bit more. Then if you have a pair of tweezers, sometimes you can get a little bit extra that you can't get with your fingers. But fingernails are honestly kind of the king here, because the tweezers being metal, they can dent and damage the wood if you're not careful. Again, not that you would really notice that, but always want to treat your rackets with care. It's a tip for all you single men out there. Treat your woman as you would treat your rackets. It's a secret. So on this top strip of tape, we're looking for a good place to start peeling it from. And that can be a little hard to find. Generally, I like to look for places like this. And you can see it's a lighter tone. That's because it's not as doesn't have as strong close as adhesion. It's a little bit loose, so I try to get my tweezers under it and peel upwards. Okay, like that. It's coming off. Okay. You can save your foreskin jokes for later. You can listen to this. Okay. Nice bit of that. Again, fingernails. Hands are gonna get sticky, but it's all for a good cause. Got a good bit of that. Okay. All right, I think we got a good bit of that. And then one trick is that the adhesive likes adhesive, so if I've got a little bit of this tape, sometimes you can kind of rub it against an edge of the tape that's on there and you can get it to lift a little bit. Don't know if you can see that little edge just come up there, and then we're gonna, because you want to try to get it to ball together. It sticks to each other. Cool. And for good measure, see if it kind of can pick up some of the fuzzy stuff. Maybe not. All right. We'll hit this with another wipe. Then we should be good. That's interesting. There's like it's like kind of a dent or a chip, but it seems to be more of a natural notch in the wood rather than, or at most, a manufacturing defect. Definitely could not have gone there before I undid the grip. So really my goal here is to get off most of the fuzzies and the kind of the traces of the tape adhesive at both ends. Okay. Okay, I think I've gotten most of it. And you don't have to spend as much time as I do on this. I'm just very particular about getting it as clean as possible before I move on. So Even doing a single racket can make your fingers tired from the scrubbing, whatever. Oops.
Meow.
The top of the handle can be a little tricky sometimes because obviously if the wood grains are going straight, some of them are going to be exposed up here, right? Because the wood tapers. So when you scrub up here, you're often going to get a lot of fuzz balls or resistance, and you're not going to be able to clean this as well because there's also a lot more places for the adhesive to get stuck in. Gonna probably need a new one that's dried out. This thing about these wipes is that because it's alcohol, it dries out pretty quickly. So we're just gonna contribute to world waste here. Okay. That's good. Okay, well, I mean, even I have to call it a day eventually, so I think we're about getting there. So one of the interesting things that I wanted to look at was also the wood quality. And part of my hypothesis was thinking that different rackets from different regions had different wood supply. And just by feel, it seems like these two, and it's not just from the dye, but these two feel more similar in terms of density. And this is where I would run my fingernail kind of into the wood there a little bit just to see how much it gives, because this one feels firmer. It's hard to describe really, but you can kind of see how these two, the wood in these two, is a little porous, and it like kind of is flaking a little bit. And if we look at especially here where there's not so much black dye, it's almost a lighter tone, it's less yellow, and the wood is harder. You can also tell from the bezels. Okay, on the softer wood, the bezels are going to be more rounded, and they're not going to feel that sharp like that. But with harder wood, the bezels will be firmer. And a little bit of the same story here. Hard to tell. Well, anyways, that's all I have for you today. When I get closer to busting the strings on the other 3 rackets, then I'll come back and do a second video of undoing the grips on those, and then we'll cut all the strings. Then we're gonna have a video where I go to the shop, put all these on the precision machine, and label them. I think that's very important too, otherwise I won't know which one's which. And yeah, that'll be topic for the future video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.